Hello my friends, and welcome out to another episode of Andrew Good Camera. In today's episode, we are going to be comparing two entry-level cameras to help you decide which one is right for you. Now, when I say entry-level, I want to make one thing clear. This is not like consumer-level stuff. This is prosumer, or an entry into professional mirrorless cameras. These are two very, very good cameras, very capable cameras. They're on the lower end of the high end of cameras, to try to put that into perspective. And the two cameras we have for you today are the Nikon Z FC and Fuji's X-S20. Both of these cameras are comparable. They both have sort of an SLR appearance and look, kind of a vintagey type look. They both have fully articulating flip screens, and they are both APS-C cameras, meaning they both have smaller sensor size, not quite as large as full frame cameras that you'll get when you start to upgrade, if you do, to larger cameras with larger sensors. Having said that, just because the sensor size is a little smaller doesn't mean that these aren't extremely capable cameras. They're both amazing, and they're both incredible in many ways, and I'm excited to give them both a good testing. We're on our way to Flagstaff, Arizona, and there we plan to do a little bit of a road trip and capture a ton of photography. This video will be more of a first impressions of how these cameras do compared to each other in a realistic environment, travel photography. We'll be doing lots of different types of photography along the way, landscape, travel, like I said, maybe even some wildlife if we can a little bit. I'll try to do some portraiture at some point of my son and just tell you how they do. And then the second video will go a little bit more scientific. We'll just kind of compare spec to spec, run down the list. That'll appeal more to the geeks, I guess, those that want to geek out with specs. But in this video, I just want to talk mostly about what it's like to shoot with them in the real world. So let's get to that. Get down to business, start taking some photos. There's a lovely scene here right off the road on our little drive down to Flagstaff. These boulders giving some good foreground interest to this beautiful plateau wall. And I'm just going to take this handheld with the Fuji X-S20 here. The one thing to note about this camera, it does have sensor stabilization, so it means that I don't have to worry so much about doing this handheld and making sure my shutter speed settings are fast enough to where I don't get any blur in the picture. That really does help. I don't have to have a tripod in those situations, unless I was in low light and a more dramatic scene. Then I might require a little bit more tripod or a little bit more image stabilization. The other thing I note about this camera is that when I first started pressing the shutter to half press to focus, which is common, you'll usually half press to focus by default. You can change that, of course. Some people, especially back in the day, they used to do back button focus, and you can change that to do that if you'd like. I don't think that's necessary anymore with how far autofocus has come. But as you half press, I noticed you have to go much further than I was expecting to get the half press, and as much pressure, which in other cameras would actually take the photo. So in this case, that took a minute. It kind of threw me off. You have to give it a good half press and then fire the trigger. As we get going on this road trip, I do want to thank LensRentals.com for providing us the gear. I would not have access to these cameras were it not for Lens Rental, and I know this video is one that a lot of you want and need, so thank them, not me. Thank me by thanking them. By using Lens Rental, the next time you need to rent something for a video shoot or photography shoot, or just to try something out, if you just want to try one of these out, go ahead and use them. I use them when I do video shoots. Commonly, when I don't have the gear I need for that shoot, I will use, they're the people I turn to every time to rent the gear that I need. So thank you so much, lensrentals.com. Use the link in the description to learn more about them. We're still driving to Flagstaff, have not arrived yet, but I did see another shot off the side of the road. Again, I'm not gonna make a big spectacle of it and get my tripod out because, I don't know, it's a little sketch out here in the middle of nowhere. No trespassing sign on that fence, not gonna go beyond it, but even still, although there's a really cool abandoned building out there, I don't wanna linger, I just wanna run over, handheld to grab the shot. This time I'm gonna use the Nikon Z FC. This one does not have image stabilization in the body, so I'm gonna have to be a little bit more, I don't know, liberal with the ISO. The sun is behind some clouds. That gives us some good soft lighting, but it also means that I'm gonna have to bring the ISO up maybe 200, 400 at the most, so that I have plenty of shutter speed to work with to get this long shot of this beautiful mesa and this really cool abandoned house. But I'm just gonna run over there and grab it really fast. Run over, hold still to get the shot, run back, and don't get shot. That's the goal. One thing I love about this right off the bat is the shutter sound. It might be superfluous, I might be a little shallow, but that makes me really like this camera a lot. Oh, it's so good. It is nearly sunset on the side of this road, and the light is so beautiful. We've got some good very high cloud covering, which is providing this really soft pastel lighting situation for these mesas out there in the distance. And I saw a shot off of the freeway that I absolutely love. So I'm gonna set up this time with the tripod to get some stabilization so that I can shoot at ISO 100 and a little bit longer of a shutter speed at a really high F value so that everything's in focus, and show you those shots side by side of these beautiful mesas with this wonderful light before we lose it. Starting to think the idea of shooting over the barbed wire was a bad idea. I've caught my shirt in it now several times, but what a great shot. Thing that I'm not liking about the Fuji, see, it auto rotated so that all of the menu items I could see vertically, but with Nikon and Canon they haven't auto rotated, and I wonder if that's a setting. I'll have to dive in and see. I don't remember that being an issue with my cameras that I've shot with in the past, so gonna have to look at why that's not auto-rotating for vertical mode. But man, this is a spectacular shot. I just love it. Good morning, almost afternoon. Wendy's, man. I let my kid convince me that we should eat at Wendy's last night. That was a massive mistake. Bad night, bad morning. Was hoping to do some photography, hoping I can later tonight. That's the situation right now. Photography's on standby. A little setback, but fortunately we have no timetable. We got spring break this week. Nothing but time. Back to bed for now. In the back of this luxurious van. Best place ever to get food poisoning. Sarcasm. All right, my friends, we're feeling a little bit better this afternoon. Starting to recover from the Wendy's incident, the great Wendy's incident of 2024, we'll call it. Though I wanted to just, now that we have a chance to just take a breather, I wanted to talk about these two cameras just in terms of first impression. I photographed just a little bit yesterday with both of them. But, you know, my first impressions of both of them, you'll never get a second chance at a first impression. So I need to tell you while it's fresh what I thought of shooting with these right out the gate. And in both cases, I was not disappointed. They're both really good-looking cameras. That's the one thing that I'll say right off the bat is if you want eye candy, or in this case, neck candy, I don't know. If you want something that will make you look classy, fashionable, and savvy, I mean, you can't go wrong with either of these guys. ZFC definitely has the more vintage appeal going for it. It also, appears a lot more like a film camera. And so that's great if you don't want to get robbed. People won't be as, keen on swiping something that looks like this as opposed to a massive, expensive-looking piece of kit around your neck. And similarly, the X-S20. X-S20 is a smaller little guy, but honestly, they feel, as far as weight, I mean, you're going to get a little more weight on because of the lens on this guy, but other than that, they're going to be similar. But that's just like looks. When it comes to actual usage, or I guess how they feel in the hand, when you just heft it, when you use it, and I've said this before when I've reviewed the ZFC, it feels flimsy and light and plasticky. It looks like it's going to be this kind of tough, maybe thicker magnesium alloy, maybe some brass in there. I don't know. It looks like you're going to have something substantial, but once you feel it, hold it, use it, you realize that it does feel a little consumery, plasticky. I'm not actually sure what it's made of. I think there is, though, a lot of plastic, even even where it is magnesium alloy, it doesn't feel quite as, quite as tough as some others. Definitely not as tough as what we have here with the X-S20 that feels substantial. Feels like if you drop it, things aren't going to snap. But for instance, this thing just feels so flimsy, like delicate, like it's just gonna definitely won't survive my usage. I'm hard on cameras. I'm like, I drop them, I chuck them around in my bags. I'm the worst camera owner ever. And I do that for you guys so that you don't have to. So you know what cameras will survive abuse and which won't. But I don't think this would. Other than that, though, it's great. Like, usability-wise, I love the dedicated dials. As you already know if you've been following for a while, right now, the camera that I'm using is the big brother of the ZFC, and that's the ZF. Man, I just love this camera. Absolutely in love with it. But as you also know, I've shot Fuji forever, and I absolutely love Fuji, too. So, anyway, that's just kind of from a superficial level. When you start to dig a little deeper, there's a little bit more refinement, I feel like, on the Fuji end of the spectrum. For instance, like I said yesterday, when you flip this screen to the side and shoot vertically, the whole orientation moves with you. It does not do so with the ZFC, and that's slightly annoying. It's not the end of the world, but it's those little refinements that I appreciated about Fuji. Now, the one thing, though, that I guess offsets that, and I really love, are those dials on top for shutter and ISO. I'm not a big fan, personally, of having an ISO button you have to choose to change the ISO. That's not my favorite thing in the world. And I would have much preferred, instead of a mode dial up top, I mean, what a waste of space. It's so annoying. Why didn't they just give us the shutter speed dial right there? I don't know. Also, this thing over here, that flips the flash. And then there's a dial over here. I would have preferred, like, the numbered ISO dial over there. I mean, other Fuji cameras do that, right? This one by default switches your film simulation. Don't like that at all. I will be reprogramming that. Hate it, in fact. Like, I don't know. These are features that are going to appeal more to a consumer, straight up consumer, who's not going to dedicate the time to learn to manually shoot, to take full intentionality and control over their settings. So I guess that works for a lot of the consumers. But if I'm looking at this as an entry point into shooting professionally, I would much prefer that these dials reflect the dedicated ISO and shutter dials that we have on advanced. That's just me personally. It's getting too many. I'll come back to that later. That's the specs of photography, though. Now that I'm starting to feel better. So why Flagstaff? I'm glad you asked. And the reason why is nothing to do with Flagstaff, but rather what goes through it, and that is Route 66, which is one of my favorite highways of all time anywhere in the world because of the historic nature of it, the nostalgia of it, and the sheer volume of abandoned rural dystopian places, gas stations, homes, all over the place. And any chance I can, I try to find a place to get on Route 66 and then follow it, because you find the most amazing things to photograph. And for someone like me, who is obsessed with rural decay and rural landscapes, it's a gold mine. We're on our way to a couple small towns, and I've heard are excellent locations. So we'll do some photography there and see what we can come up with. Looks like the best photo locations are way out there in this town, as far as I can tell. There's a lot of really run-down looking buildings that I've seen as I've kind of been around this town on the outskirts of this area, but one problem. Womp womp womp. This is awesome. I mean, there's nothing to photograph. There's no photo here, but we are on the original, unimproved Route 66 highway right now. And that's just cool. It just feels nice to be on it. I just love it. Just being here. Even if I don't get a photo, these are the type of moments that I enjoy about photography, if that makes sense. So far today, we are striking out on the photography side of things. So I think we're going to cheat. Arizona. It's almost Jurassic Park. Feels like Jurassic Park. I think these are the goats they feed to the velociraptors, if I'm not mistaken. For bears, we want to change things to be in the bear mode, or animal mode, I guess. So the Nikon Z FC does have animal mode, animal autofocus. So we'll see how well that does. But not to be outdone, Fuji also has what looks to be Batman. I mean a cat. So hopefully that will work for bears as well. We'll see which of these cameras does better, but I'm sure they'll both do great. Lenses, not the best, I understand, for getting those long shots that we'll probably need in here. So this might be a bust, but oh yeah, National Geographic level right here. If you have to take photos through a window, the best thing to do is get up right next to the window as close as possible. If you can get something to reduce the glare around it while you're up close to the window. Hey, I see it. Focusing on the face of the donkey. I got the donkey that time. I noticed some of the other animals it didn't. There's a little yellow square that zeroes in on the face. With the ZFC, it got that donkey's face pretty well. So it likes to photograph the asses. By the way, this is a family friendly. We're talking donkeys, all right? Get your mind out of the gutter. So the ZFC, it nailed that little animal's face. Let's see if we can See if we can get that to happen. I wasn't really paying attention to how well it was zooming in on that, or zeroing in on the face with the X-S20. So let's see how it does. I'll pay particularly close attention to that. Yeah, it's getting them great, actually. It has a little green box that forms. This is the closest we've gotten to an animal so far. I didn't record it, but we were just through the bison enclosure, and the Nikon Z FC was not picking up the face. It wasn't focusing in on the face of the bison. It was gaining focus. There was no little yellow box on the face like there was with Fuji. So far, Fuji's done a better job. And to me, that is extremely surprising and shocking, because typically Nikon is better at autofocus in general than Fuji. It always has been. So that's interesting and fascinating. And this is anecdotal. It's not super scientific. We'll have to see if that same thing happens with human faces. We may see them reverse, because based on my experience, Nikon is better at gaining focus on the eye, critical focus in a portrait situation. But we'll test it. We'll find out. Get up closer. Try to get all three heads in the shot without it, and then get rid of any weird background like the shovel. See if you can get a simple background. Too many shadows. There you go. Now you can do it.
Did you know that in addition to really in-depth camera and lens reviews, I also teach a photography workshop? It's true, and you can get access to all my coursework on my Patreon, including the course I call my Zero to Hero Workshop, designed to take you wherever you're at in your photography journey and inject a huge boost of creativity immediately. You'll also get early access and ad and interruption-free access to my videos. So check out the link on the screen or in the video description to join my Patreon and become the photography hero you've always wanted to be.
Which of those two cameras after we did the walking tour? So, and just some context, Mr. Alex has a broken collarbone he's healing from right now. Which shoulder is it that's broken? And you're able to hold that camera even though you're healing up from a broken collarbone. So which of these two cameras do you like better, the Fuji or the Nikon? The Fuji. Why?
Comfortable.
More comfortable to use and hold?
Yeah.
Yep, I agree actually. So if you have a broken collarbone, you know which one to get. Town we're in, I don't even remember the name of it, but it's very kitsch, very touristy, which is fine. I'm not too cool for that. So textures, all about textures right now, and this wall is great. I've been shooting with this mainly because my son, as we do this photo walk, he's been loving the Fuji X-S20. So as I shoot with the CFC, there's a couple of usability things that I don't love about it. It does not have a joystick like the Fuji X-S20 does. And I enjoy that joystick to change focus point. I'm not a big fan of the D-pad. If I had to have one or the other, I'm going to do joystick. The other thing that I don't love about it, from a usability standpoint, is the ISO dial. You have to push the top of this down to then move it. You can't just rotate it like you can the shutter button. And I don't know why. Why? They're the same profile as far as height, these buttons on top. Is it a defect? Do they all come like that? I don't like it though. I have to push this down to manipulate the ISO, and that slowed me down. I don't like to be slowed down. So overall usability concerns with the Z FC, I mean, that I think Fuji's just had longer to perfect and refine the usage of that style of camera body, and they've done a good job with it, a much better job than the ZFC, unfortunately. I feel like we finally found what I've been looking for here in Ash Fork, Arizona. I wish there was a little bit more light in that sky, but I'll take it. My friends, that is it for today. I think we had we just had a cracking good day for photos. The rest of the day started feeling better. The sun came out, a lot of great textures, a lot of great buildings. Going down over the hill, and I didn't record it, but I got a couple really nice landscape shots of these just open plains here on Route 66, one of them with the nice golden glow on a horse. Love it, so good. As far as cameras and my final recommendations to you, oh man, you know, this is mostly a first impressions video. Like I said, there's going to be a part 2, and in part 2 I'm going to get way more scientific. For those of you that are more technical, we're going to nerd out a little bit. But for those who are just, they want the best possible shooting experience, I'm going to sleep on it. First thing in the morning, I'm going to give you my final thoughts. All right, my friends, this is the final day of our journey. It's decision time. It's time for me to tell you which of these two cameras I would choose and that I think you should choose. And I had a chance to sleep on it. I've also thought about it another few hours of our drive. We spent the night in Kingman, Arizona. We went through Las Vegas. We're driving up into Utah now. I've stopped for a couple landscape photos, but on the way, we got some more photos that I'll show you now.
I know I've said it before, and I will say it again, that in-body image stabilization on the Fuji X-S20 is super helpful and allowed me to get these night photography shots without the need of a tripod, and at night in a small town especially is a time I would certainly rather not be dragging out a tripod. I also let my son do a little fishing and tested out the eye autofocus on both cameras, and they both did exceptionally well. I'm not sure this was scientific enough to determine which is better, but suffice it to say neither missed focus on the eye for any of these shots. So for travel and documentary style work, I'm comfortable with either camera and we'll call it a draw.
During this final leg of our journey, as we're almost home, I have had time to consider these two cameras and which one I think is better for me, or I would choose if I was new, and which one I think you should choose. And I do have some suggestions, and I'm gonna get two last shots, landscape shots that I in this area called Cedar Pocket that I really love. One lends itself to this camera, and this lens, it's a nice shot of a Joshua tree and a mesa behind it. Actually, both of them will be similar shots in that regard. It's nice and overcast, very high clouds, which creates a very beautiful pastel look in these rich red tones of this canyon that we're in. Love the tones. Perfect lighting conditions for the middle of the day. I couldn't ask for better conditions. This is beautiful. It's wonderful. And this shot, I absolutely love. I love the composition. I love those pastel colors. I almost prefer this to a dramatic morning or evening shot, at least for this location. So this is perfect. The other thing is it's just right where I'm parked, not very far away. And this is great because this camera I would prefer to do mounted to a tripod because it doesn't have IBIS. And that's the one concession that you make with a camera like this, or at least one large one over the Fuji X-S20. So this camera right here, this is the camera that I would probably pick if I was new to photography out of these two, which is really difficult to say because there's so many other things that I prefer about that X-S20, which I'll come back to momentarily. But first, let me just talk to you about what I would choose this one for. And I'm not going to recommend this to everyone who's watching, just some of you. The ones that I would recommend this to are those getting into photography, picking up your first entry into photography with plans to get in that upgrade cycle. You're going to pick up a more affordable but very nice mirrorless body that will allow you to get into Nikon's full-frame glass, like this one. The 50mm S1.8 is a really good lens. This isn't a cheap kind of kit lens that you would get in a lot of systems, and this is a great place to start when you're going to dedicate yourself to a system with an upgrade path, with the idea that you're going to eventually have a full suite of lenses and then eventually probably upgrade into a full frame camera. Now, there's nothing low quality about this at all, but you can get better image quality. You can get more resolution, higher pixel density in a full frame offering than this will provide. But it's much more expensive. And someday maybe that's what you want to do. If you don't mind using a tripod for those landscape situations where it's a little bit darker conditions and you don't want to crank the ISO, you don't get in-body image stabilization, so you have to compensate for that. And if you're okay with that, but you want that upgrade path, then I'd say this camera, it's the way to go. You'll probably, just like me, enjoy the dials, the feel of the camera. You'll probably be a little disappointed with the build quality, the plasticky feel of some of the components. But if you're like me, you'll also really love Nikon's colors right out of camera. So beautiful. There's a lot to really like about this camera. And those are just some of the highlights. I have enjoyed this. In fact, I enjoyed shooting it with it more. If you watched my very first impressions of this, I think I did a year or so ago, I really didn't like this camera, partially because my expectations were just too high, that this would compete with some of Fuji's best cameras, which it doesn't. And so I was disappointed. I was particularly disappointed with how cheap it felt. And so, but that's been tempered now that I've had a chance to shoot with it for a few days. And I have to say, I have very much enjoyed my time with it. And this is the camera that I would choose if I want an upgrade path. But if I don't, we'll come back to that and the X-S20. First, let me take this shot, which I'm really excited about. But if you don't care about that, or if that's not quite as important to you, having that full frame offering with an upgrade path in your future that will give you those large sensors with massive amount of pixels, if that's not something you're bothered by, I would choose this little guy because it is better in many ways. It's more robust, it's tougher. For travel, that means a lot to me. It's easier to use. It feels more comfortable to use. It doesn't feel plasticky. It doesn't worry me. And above all, probably one of the most important factors to me is why I'm right here. I'm up on top of a mountain that I just hiked up to get the shot that I'm about to get without a tripod, without as much gear, just handheld. All I really needed was this to get this superb shot. I can shoot down to at f/16 at 30th of a second, ISO 100, and get this shot just fine because of the in-body image stabilization. And I cannot express how important that is as a travel photographer, as a documentary photographer, as a portrait photographer, as anyone who runs and guns it, who's on the road a lot. In-body image stabilization is awesome. And once you have it in a camera, when you go back to something like the ZFC, you feel it, you really do notice. So here I am with this beautiful shot I'm so excited to get. Lends itself well to this 35mm, 50mm full frame equivalent field of view. I can get it stabilized. I'm gonna shut up now and take the shot. And that's it. A lot less faff, a lot less fuss. And so this is the camera I would choose if I'm a prosumer, documentary photographer, someone who isn't being paid for photography, but who loves it, who takes it as serious as a professional, and who doesn't need that upgrade path to the full frame high megapixels. This is what I would choose 100% for sure. But if it were me starting over and I had to choose between one of these two, I would choose the Nikon ZFC as my first camera, knowing that eventually I would get into some of those higher megapixel full frame offerings so that I can get the absolute best image quality I can out of some of the photography that I do as a professional. So that's really, to me, the most important points to talk about. There's a lot more though, and we could geek out about the specs. In fact, we will in the next video, part 2 of this. If you want to geek out with me on all of the numbers and compare them side by side and help make a decision that way, that may appeal to some of you or help to further refine your decision. But for everybody else, I hope that this gave you an overall good sense of which of these are going to work better for you from a day-to-day shooting experience point of view. And if it did, you can thank me by checking out the links in the description. Like I said, I have a course available for you newer or kind of middle of your career type photographers looking to take your photography to the next level. That 0 to Hero course will really help you. So check that out, become a patron, and you'll get free access to that as long as you need it. And I'll continue to add to that course. And also know that you're going to be helping me and my family to eat and survive. I do this full time right now, and I really appreciate your support. Also, we appreciate the support of lensrental.com. Check them out and be sure to use them for the next time you need to rent gear. In the meantime, hopefully you were able to come to a better decision of which camera you're going to use. But regardless of which you choose, I hope you remember to do good with your camera, and we'll talk to you again real soon.